So, you might be wondering, why are so many Righteous Fire builds using Legacy of Fury? In fact, you might be wondering, why are people using Legacy of Fury at all? And this confusion's very understandable. It's often the case in Path of Exile, that an item will be released that's terrible. Or if not terrible, at the very least, it's not very good. And then, the item gets buffed, or the game gets changed, some sort of synergy's added, and all of a sudden, people start using it seemingly out of nowhere. That's basically what's happened here. The Legacy of Fury is a drop from the Maven, and when it originally came out, it was not very good. To start with, it had -15 to -10% to all elemental resistances, which means you had to have way better resists on other pieces of gear, plus you were basically giving up your boots. The second problem was, the main effect was that it dropped Scorched Ground. Now the Scorched Ground didn't have a lot of area of effect, and because it was Scorched Ground rather than you scorching the enemy, it wasn't scaled by your non-damaging ailment effect. This in combination with the fact that you're giving up your boots, so no Tailwind for you, no Onslaught, no Elusive, none of those fun things. Well, no one used Legacy of Fury. And this is a shame, because it had a genuinely cool effect. And that was that when you killed a scorched enemy, i.e. something standing on your scorched ground, it would basically explode, inflicting a % HP burn on nearby enemies. The boots had a 30 to 40% chance for this to happen, and the problem was that you had to get them on the scorched ground. But it was a really cool effect, and if you played in 316, you'd probably know exactly how overpowered % HP burning damage is. Part of the reason that % HP burning damage is so good is it's just as powerful against enemies in a white tier 1 map as it is in the most juiced tier 16. As the enemies scale up, so does the damage. And given that, you might start to see why it was used on a Righteous Fire build. RF builds are really good at kind of passively walking past enemies and watching them die, but their clear is kind of limited. It's the thing standing next to you. So Legacy of Fury goes a long way to extend this range. And because you're an RF build, you're already scaling burning damage, which means things that do burning damage synergize really well. You don't have to hit an enemy, which is good because RF doesn't hit, and now that RF doesn't need elemental overload, there's even less of a reason to add hit-based stuff to an RF build. And so in that sense, there were a lot of good reasons to use the boots with RF even before. The problem with this was, they were very awkward to use and had massive downsides, which made it not very worth it. Now if you're here more for RF stuff than Legacy of Fury, then be sure to sub to the channel, because in an upcoming video I'm going to showcase my Righteous Fire build, and I'll go much more into the gearing, the mechanics, and all that stuff. On the other hand, if you're finding this look at Legacy of Fury to be useful, then be sure to leave a like on the video, as that really helps out in the YouTube algorithm. But now, what changed? Why are people using them? And the simple answer is, they got buffed. Remember how they used to have -10 to -15% to all elemental resist? Yeah, that's gone. As it turns out, giving up your boots for an explody effect was already a pretty fair price. And adding a penalty on that just added insult to injury. And the boots were also changed to remove the Scorched Ground effect. Instead, nearby enemies are scorched. Now, unfortunately, this uses the wording nearby, and in this case means enemies fairly close around you, about RF range, rather than the nearby that goes to the edge of your screen. Not that you'd know that from looking at the item. But nearby enemies are scorched, and the boots now roll up to 50% increased effective scorch. This means two very important things. First of all, the enemies that explode burning surrounding foes is much more reliable now, since everything around you is automatically scorched. And second of all, your non-damaging ailment effect scales this scorch, which means you can easily get more than the base 10%, and scorch reduces all elemental resistances. So given how the boots work now, you might see why they're such an obvious fit for an RF build. You get much better clear off of a burning effect than you would off of RF alone. Scorching enemies reduces their fire res, which is even better for your single target damage. And let's be honest, you're an RF build, you had no effective way to use Tailwind, you weren't going to be elusive, and Onslaught doesn't make all that much sense anyway. This is what I mean when I talk about building characters with strong mechanical synergies. Everything that Legacy of Fury does complements everything that RF does, and vice versa. If you wanted to further improve this synergy, you could get some non-damaging ailment effect on your amulet. Maybe you'd want to use an Eye of Malice to push the enemy resistances even farther into the negative. Or maybe you're now thinking of a use for Legacy of Fury that doesn't involve Righteous Fire, that maybe involves some sort of hit-based build that also deals fire damage so it can benefit from the explody effect for clear. Note, this is not a true explody effect, it doesn't destroy corpses, it just proliferates in a manner very similar to one, think Herald of Ash. Or possibly some other use that I haven't thought of. And on that note, it's always cool to see items in Path of Exile that had no real use get new life breathed into them, either by changes to the game or buffs to the item. In this case, kind of both. So, what's your favorite item that languished in Path of Exile's history, only to receive a glorious rebirth in a patch later on? Feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to put them down in the comments below, or join the Discord, where you can ask questions, get build help, and hang out with the community. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. They're awesome, and they get to show it by having their name on screen in the credits of all my videos. So if you want to see your name here, be sure to check the link in the description. For more general gaming content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, and if you want a water bottle or a cool shirt, I have a link to my official merch shop in the description. I hope you learned something today, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.